Our family decided to go on a cross-country vacation back to Seattle, where we had lived for a long time. And the capstone of our vacation for my husband was going to be a long ridgeline hike with his really good friend and hiking buddy out in Mount Rainier National Park. And they left early that morning from our campsite. And we'd always had this kind of agreement where when he was hiking in the backcountry, he would text me when he was at the trailhead and let me know that he was there and everything was okay. That day, no call came through, no text. I started to text local friends, have you heard anything? And I began to get worried. And that is when the chaplains arrived at my campsite to give me the news that he had fallen to his death.
41-year-old Robert Mole died last week after falling from Barrier Peak while hiking in Mount Rainier National Park. His climbing partner was able to reach him, but
Rob was buried in the mountains that he loved, and then we flew 3,000 miles home to Boston, where we live. There was a long time where I wondered, maybe he'll walk in the door. We would sit down at dinner, and from my seat at the table, I could see the front door, and I would think, it's just about time for him to walk in from work. We've had to adapt in a lot of ways since Rob died. We were a family of 6, and so everyone at the table always sat with someone across from them. And then he's gone now, and we're a family of 5, and there's an empty chair.
The empty chair at the table, a visible reminder each day that a beloved family member has died.
But it's more than just the loss of conversation and companionship. Gone, too, are plans for the future with that person. If it's your spouse who died, the empty chair probably represents lost vacations, retirement plans, and perhaps time with children or grandchildren.
And if it's a child who died, the empty chair represents the hopes and dreams that come with the maturing of children into adulthood and their careers, marriages, and other milestones. In our case, the death of 2 of our children, Hope and Gabriel, has meant the loss of seeing them grow up and being a family of 5.
Our son lost the experience of having siblings throughout his growing up years, and now in adulthood. In this session, we'll explore some key issues that grieving families confront because of the empty chair. Welcome to Grief Share.
The empty chair represents a number of disruptions in your household. One of those will be a couple of difficult decisions. The first of these decisions is how to respond to secondary losses, the lost contributions to your household that result from your family member's absence.
When Bob and I were still together before he passed away, he did all the car maintenance. He was a really great handyman, took care of the checkbook and the bills paying, and he showed a lot more responsibility than I had ever given him credit for.
He was the cook in the family, he was the baker in the family. And my girlfriends used to envy me because in 10 years, I only cooked three meals. That was 1 breakfast and 2 dinners. And he did all the other cooking, and they would come over and feast off of his cooking,
She was a travel partner. She was navigator when we were on the open road traveling. She was a confidant. Some things you can't say at work. I would say things to her or ideas. She would be like my idea board, bounce responses back to me.
My husband, Rob, did a lot of things around the house, and he fixed the plumbing when we had toilet problems. And he took the mice out of the shed when I walked into the shed and found a mouse in there. And suddenly when he was gone, it was me alone with the mouse. And I couldn't handle the toilet and the mouse and the leaking window and the taxes. I mean, all of the things that he had done. And those are just the material and practical ways that I lost him as the family accountant, the family pest control, the family plumber.
It's interesting for me to think about roles that Winter fulfilled when she was here on Earth, that when she was gone, I had to figure out how to fill. Probably the biggest that I didn't realize was going to be really difficult was just the day-to-day of running a home with 4 kids, soccer practice, volleyball practice, drama class, and voice lesson, and all the things that my girls were involved in.
Once you've identified the secondary losses, you'll need to come up with strategies for addressing them. Sometimes that will mean finding other people to help you, but it will also mean learning more about what you're capable of doing yourself.
My kids and I, after Lisa passed away, we all went to the store and we found the products that everybody thought that I should buy. And so what I did is I actually took pictures of everything that they thought I should buy because life was such a confusing mess. And so then whenever I went back to the different stores, I had all my pictures in my phone that I would just scan through my pictures. Oh, I guess this is what I buy. Oh, I guess this is what I buy. And that was a lifesaver for me because for the first several months, I just literally referred to my pictures and just threw the stuff in my cart.
One of the things that Anita always did and did so well is she was an awesome cook. She never measured anything. She knew exactly what spices and herbs to use, produced meals that were so tasty and good. On the other hand, I can burn a pot of water. So I'm slowly learning culinary skills to survive. Probably too many frozen dinners and takeout, but it's getting better. She was the negotiator. If it came time to negotiate on the phone or even in person, say an insurance problem or a contract or whatever it was, she was on the phone and usually wound up saving us a lot of money. Where I, on the other hand, I'm kind of laid back. I have to really work at it hard, where for her it was just something she knew how to do so well.
It's sometimes the simpler things that just, who's going to take the trash down? Who's going to bring the trash cans up? So who's going to make the coffee? I mean, the things that he took care of, all those things, I began to question, what did I bring to this relationship? Those things that still are a problem for me, trying to deal with some of those things because I'm so out of my league. But I've gotten quite a list of names of people I can call. So I'm building a group of people that will come to the house to do various and sundry things. But that's an ongoing process.
I had to fill the role of mother, which I couldn't fill. And honestly, it's hard to say that anybody could ever fill for them because they'll always be, in some way, motherless daughters. They'll always be 4 girls who lost their mom. And so, thankfully, there were all kinds of women that offered to come around my girls, and it was only my job to figure out who were trustworthy people.
I've learned a lot about myself since Bob's death. I learned that there were all those things that he did that I was really capable of. I just never had to do them before. And I learned absolutely how capable and how efficient I am as an individual without someone to help or guide me or counsel me or whatever. I can do it.
A second difficult decision will be figuring out what you'll do with your loved one's possessions. Here are some ways others have handled it.
I remember maybe about a couple of months after he passed away, I started putting things in boxes, his belongings, his clothing, and just stored it away. I didn't want to do anything with it yet. I had some other widows encourage me to wait on that, to wait on either giving his things away or, maybe wait to see what the kids might want, that something special from their dad. So I waited and I stored it away for a while, probably for about a year.
I started off with something simple that I knew Nadine would want to happen. And that is her very close friends that she has known over 40 years. And I know they all dressed up. There were 2 or 3 of them that were very close to her size. And so I felt comfortable and believed that Nadine would want them to have these items. So after going through that process, now I'm faced with, what do I do with the rest of the items? So I searched around and I found an organization in Nevada. It is a shelter for battered women and their children. So I contacted them. I said, would that be something you would be interested in? They said, yes.
I remember in one of the grief share lessons, they said that we should go through our loved ones' belongings on our own. Maybe invite some people to go through with us, but not necessarily surrender that task to someone else. I had several friends and family members who asked if they could just come and go through Mark's clothes or, go through all of his tools in the garage, clean out his truck, sell it. And as much as I wanted them to, because I didn't want the pain of doing it myself, I was conflicted because I needed to go through that pain. So I kept telling them no. I felt like I needed to be connected with him. Going through his things would not only remind me of him, but also connect me with him and be able to release him.
After the death of a spouse, it's not uncommon, especially for widows, to struggle with questions about identity. For so long, their lives were so intertwined with their spouses that it's hard to think of themselves apart from them. Vanessa's identity struggle started immediately as she left her husband's hospital room.
I put Mark's coat on and was heading to the door, and I was completely shut down. But I do remember thinking, in this room, I know who I am. I'm Mark's wife. We're a power couple. We do all things together. But on the other side of that door, I have no clue who I am.
Marriage becomes so much of your identity because you give so much of yourself to the person that you're married to. And not being married anymore was a process of grief in itself, of losing half of yourself. Because I committed my life to my husband. And we did a lot of life. We were married 8 years and we did a lot of life together. And to not have that was an identity struggle. So finding my place outside of my loss was one struggle, but finding my place outside of what had been my identity for so long was a completely different struggle that I've had to face and understand.
Rethinking your identity after the death of a spouse requires asking yourself some questions about personal goals and interests that can give you some direction for the future.
A good marriage is filled with compromise and consideration and accommodation. In a good marriage, we do some things that maybe we aren't really even crazy about doing, but because we love our spouse and because our spouse really likes it, we do it. And we do it willingly and not grudgingly. But those are the kinds of things that one needs to kind of clean out eventually in that grief journey. Like, what's really me? What was me before I was married? What kinds of things did I have as goals? What kind of interests did I have? What kind of activities did I enjoy? What do I really want to grow within me? What do I want to maybe discard?
Your life is not to be defined by your loss. It will not be defined by who you lost. No, it'll be defined by your choices, the choices you make. You say, I was a wife yesterday, I'm a widow today. What is that? If that's all you are, then you're making the choice to be defined by your loss. You're much more than that. You're a friend, a parent perhaps, a grandparent perhaps. You're a church member. You're a volunteer. You're an employee. You're a coworker. You're a hobbyist of some kind. You have more life ahead of you.
It took me a year before I could really sit down and play the piano again. For fun. Now, I played for the church for a while, but I couldn't play just for me anymore. So I decided to try and do some things that I'd never done before. So I started taking painting lessons. And I've never considered myself a visual artist. I've always said that I can't draw, I can't do any of that. But I thought, if I'm going to try anything new, now is the time to do it. And I'd been to a conference, and one of the workshops I went to said, just remind yourself that everything is an experiment. And so I started painting. Painting's an experiment. And if I'm good, great. If I'm not, it was just an experiment.
Yes, I'm a widow. Yes, I'm a single mom. Yes, I'm a suicide survivor. There's so many identities I can take on. But I'm just Chrissy. And I try to remember myself as that. Like, you may feel at times you don't belong anywhere, but you just keep trying. You keep trying and figuring it out wherever God places you. I chose to be the person who sits across from the empty chair for quite a while after he died. It's become normal now, and everybody just kind of piles around the table. So much of me had felt like it was gone, that this life that we had loved, that we had built together, this family that we had loved, all of our plans for the future, everything was gone. And in the midst of surveying that destruction, I guess, I realized I'm still here. And God must have a purpose for me to be here still, that there must be something more for me to do. I've had to revisit that thought over and over again to remind myself, you're still here, Clarissa. You're still here. There's still purpose for you here. God's specialty is rebuilding things. So if that's his specialty, I'm fair game. I would love to have you rebuild me too. And I think he'll make something beautiful in his good time.
You'll recall from session 2, we introduced the concept of grief styles. Appreciating the differences in how people might express their grief is especially important among the members of a household.
Some family members might be more openly expressive than others. Working with these differences rather than ignoring them is an important part of ministering to one another at this time.
Sue could not go back to our home church that our kids had gone to church at for 10 years. She just could not go back after the funeral. She didn't want to be back in that building. On the other hand, my son and I went back to that church for quite a while, continued to worship there.
Dave wanted to surround himself with kids, Melissa's friends, kids at school. He would go to school events, but I did not want to be with Melissa's friends and with kids that age because it was just so painful.
So what I've had to do and what we've done together is allow each other to grieve differently and not to demand something of her. I wasn't about to say, you must go back to our church. That's our church. We love the church. We love the people. But I could not force her to do that.
After Paul died, Dave didn't seem very emotional about it. And that was a hard thing because I felt that you need to be sad, you needed to talk about it, you needed to cry. And Dave didn't do any of those things, not to me. I think one of my fears was that Dave would forget him. And I thought, if we don't keep talking about Paul, who is going to talk about Paul? But I realized later that Dave really cared, and Dave would talk about Paul, but he didn't talk about him the same way that I did.
When other people do their grief differently, it feels awkward. It can feel wrong. It can feel irreverent. It can feel disrespectful. And so maybe a question instead of a statement would be helpful. Just, I notice you're grieving differently than me. How is what you're doing helping you process the sadness that you feel? And that kind of opens up the invitation to say, here's how what I'm doing is helping me process the sadness that I feel. And it allows us to ask new questions. How can I serve you in your grief? How can you serve me in my grief? Who are other people that we need to call alongside of us? And by asking questions like that, when our grief is different, it allows us to understand those differences without vilifying each other, without being suspicious of one another, so that we protect the relationship that we both value, even as we're grieving in different ways.
Grief directly impacts your parenting. You have to manage your own grief while also helping your children or teens deal with theirs. Young children in particular will struggle to understand the implications of a loved one's death.
After the chaplains told me that my husband had died, I said to them, do I need to go tell my kids? And they said, nope, that is our job. I had little children at the time. And so there's a piece of telling them the story of their father's death that I am tasked with doing over and over again. Children, they grieve differently than adults do.
Kids' cognitive development really impacts how they grieve. They can only grieve what they understand. And so at each age and stage of their life, they're going to have different things that they understand and different needs for their grief.
Elizabeth, our daughter at the time when Sarah passed away, was close to 4. We were riding in the car one day and she was in the back seat. I had a good friend who had just had a baby, and her older daughter was the same age as Elizabeth, and Elizabeth asked if we could go visit them. I'm driving and I said, no, we need to wait a little bit. Her mom's just had a baby. We can't go right now. And there's this kind of quiet in the background for a second, and then I hear her little voice say, well, when her new baby dies, can we go see her then? I remember being trying not to go off the road because I was so shocked. Oh my gosh, she thinks all new babies die. That's her experience. That's what she thinks.
The things my kids understood in that moment when their dad died, it's different now, 2.5 years later. And they hit another developmental milestone, whether it's adding more details about his death now that they're older and that's developmentally appropriate, whether it is discussing the surrounding events of his death that now they can kind of take in because they have the maturity and space to take that in, and as they grow in their grief experience.
When our kids are grieving, one of the best things we can do is just be near them. Be in the room while they're playing. Find a reason to go for a drive, to go get ice cream or something that's just a little further, and we're in that shared space so that the thoughts that are moving through their mind get the opportunity to kind of spill out through their mouth, and then we get to engage with them on their terms rather than our prompting.
In terms of their development, teens stand at a crossroads in life. They have maturing abilities and a broader vision of future possibilities, and yet they lack the life experience and wisdom that help them realize those possibilities. We see that even in the way they handle grief.
Some of the ways in which teenagers deal with death are very similar to kids. They may have trouble sleeping. They may have a decreased appetite or even an increased appetite. But they're also struggling with identity issues. And so in the midst of losing someone important to them, they're also trying to figure out who they are.
They are seeking to be independent. It is very typical for a teen to find a lot of their support through their peer system.
So that can be a little bit tricky if peers aren't really able to give that support. One of the things that teenagers have expressed to me before is just, it's hard to be empathetic to my friends and their little problems that I feel like they have, because I've got this really big thing that I'm dealing with, and they're worried about the dress they're going to wear for prom, or what this boy said to them, or something that seems insignificant. So sort of this catch-22 of, I want to be near my friends, I want to relate to them, I want them to support me, but on the other hand, I really can't relate to them anymore.
The catch-22 for teens who want their peer support but find it hard to relate to them since their loss can open the door to fruitful conversations with them.
For suggestions on having such fruitful conversations about grief with children or teens, look for the additional videos found at griefshare.org/my.
As time moves on and your family matures, you'll experience a lot of life's milestones without your loved one. Your loss will be felt at those times, but celebrations will still be possible.
It's okay until I'm old and gray to miss him, to miss the life that we lived together, and to feel sad that he's missing all of the special landmark milestone moments that we always dreamed he would be at.
It took me years to see that there is an element of pain from a death that never goes away. So when I realized that, I thought, okay, that's recognizing that pain's going to exist and that joy can exist in the midst of that. I need to focus on what that looks like. And there was an incident that I think really illustrated this for me, was when my younger daughter, Laura, got married. Laura was posed for the photographer with her flowers, and, you know, she's all dressed and ready for the wedding and everything. And all of a sudden, she kind of broke her pose and she started to cry. Just at that point, her uncle Buddy, came into view. He came up and hugged Laura, and tears were running down his face. And they didn't say a word to each other. They just held each other. And then he backed up, he kind of wiped away her tears and gave her a thumbs up and went on. There was an acknowledgement of the pain that her father and his brother were not there. And that kind of became my image of what peace and joy, peace and pain living together looks like.
On top of changing household responsibilities and roles, you might also be struggling with financial and legal concerns. Look in your participant guide this week. You'll find tools for handling financial affairs after a death, managing spending, and making wise decisions about an inheritance.
There's this great part of our community that was just super supportive, but then there were some folks who really didn't know what to do with us.
And so often I would just say, well, I guess I'm invisible.
How could a person say that, knowing that, she passed away?
Obviously, after the death of a loved one, there's a sense in which the empty chair will always be empty.
But your heart can still be full of memories, hope, and an openness to new experiences and possibilities.
If you don't think that's possible, it's okay. In time, you can get there with God's help.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to talking with you next time.